Ready? Ready? What I like to do is show you guys how to divide polynomials using synthetic division. So what we're going to do is it's a little bit of a shortcut. And what you guys notice is when you're multiplying, when you're multiplying this is to the negative exponent, what you can remember is that's essentially can be rewritten as 1 over x plus 2. Well, if I was to multiply this times that, I would know that this is the same thing as actually dividing that x plus 2. Now the next thing to know about synthetic division, the one most important thing we have to have is we have to divide, we have to make sure our divisor is in the form of x minus r. And so what I look at and what I notice, therefore the coefficient of your variable has to be 1. So if you don't have that, you're going to have to factor out a coefficient. In our last example, I think we had 2x minus 3. And so what I did is I had to factor out a 2 to get an x minus 3 halves. And this was now it's in the form of x minus r. So now, when we're going to work on this one, I know my divisor is in the form of x minus r. But remember that x minus r, that minus r, the negative sign tells you you're going to use the opposite. So therefore, if I have a positive, I'm going to use an opposite. My r is going to be the opposite sign. So it's going to be a negative 2. Then you just draw a nice little box here. And then you take your coefficients. Now the main important thing with the coefficients is you have to make sure every single term going down is represented. So my x to the 4th is going to be 1. X to the 3rd, the coefficient is negative 3. I do not have a coefficient for x squared, so I know that x squared is going to be 0. Because essentially you could write plus 0x squared in this problem, plus 5, and plus a constant. If you're not given a constant, you got to make sure you add a 0 at the end. And then that's a negative 6. Now,
wait, that's not negative 6, that's minus negative 6. No, it's not. There's 2 subtraction signs.
No, that's just part of the 6. That's a literal.
Sorry.
Oh my god.
So, now what you're going to do is, if you guys can just kind of remember these rules, add, multiply. So what you're going to do, you're just going to drop down the first number, and then we multiply. Negative 2 times 1 gives you a negative 2. Negative 3 plus negative 2 gives you a negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 5 gives you a positive 10. 0 plus 10 gives you 10. Negative 2 times 10 gives you a negative 20. 5 plus negative 20.
Can you do that again but slower?
How are you getting past the 2?
Okay, I drop down the first number. I multiply diagonally. Negative 2 times 1
Yeah.
gives me negative 2.
But where'd you get the negative 2 from?
The negative 2 is my r. Everything comes in x minus r format. So your r you place outside of here, and then here you place all your coefficients.
But it says x plus 2.
Right.
But r is the opposite.
R, you're always going to take the opposite form of it, so it's going to be negative.
But if it was negative, then it'd be positive?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what the negative sign means. Remember, negative always means the opposite sign. So then, are you following out? So now you have negative 3 plus negative 2 gives me negative 5. So you add, remember when you're going down you add. Then you multiply. Negative 2 times negative 5 is a positive 10. 0 plus 10 is 10. Negative 2 times 10 gives you a negative 20. 5 plus negative 20 gives you a negative 15. Negative 2 times negative 15 is a positive 30. Add that up, I get a positive 24. Now, when given a number at the end, we know that's going to be our remainder. So what I'm going to simply write is my remainder term, r, just like you did in 3rd or 4th grade when you had the remainder, you wrote that r. And then what you work is we're actually going to work backwards with all of our terms. So first, you have a r is your remainder. If it's a 0, then you know you have no remainder. But unfortunately, we have a remainder here. The next term is your constant term. Then you have your linear term. Then you have your quadratic term. and then you have your cubic term. And one way you can always make sure your answer is correct is your term should always be 1 degree. Remember degrees with exponents we already talked about? Your degree should always be 1 less than what your leading, your highest degree is.
Oh, so wait, the degree of that number is the minus the exponent.
Sorry, say that again?
Like, your degree is 1 less than the exponent. of
Yes,
that.
because essentially, look at all you're doing is you're multiplying x cubed times x. You add exponents and you get x to the 4th. So now all these numbers right here are the coefficients of my equation. So now I can write 1. I don't need to write that. And then this is negative 5 x squared plus 10x minus 15 plus 24 divided by my divisor, which is x plus 2. So the main important thing is to always remember your key points is r is always going to be the opposite. You got to make sure it's in the form of x minus r. You take your coefficients. If missing a coefficient, you got to make sure you represent that with a 0. You follow the process, which is pretty easy, add and multiply. And then you always have your last number is your remainder. So if it's 0, then your remainder is 0. And then you work backwards to get your constant, linear, quadratic, cubic. And then you just take, those are the coefficients, and you write your equation. So that's how you divide polynomials using the synthetic division.